Welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year to you all. I'm sure you've all heard the news and Labour's refusal for an inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. And in this video, I want to take a look at, is Starmer hiding something? Starmer and his government are now facing increasing scrutiny after his decision to block a proposed national inquiry into the grooming gangs. This controversial move has sparked widespread outrage. Rupert Lowe has just made a speech yesterday in Parliament, and he raised serious and necessary questions about justice for the victims of these heinous crimes. The government's decision to resist such an inquiry, coupled with its accusations that those calling for it are amplifying far-right rhetoric. I mean, this begs the question, what is Labour trying to hide here? Rupert Lowe's speech in Parliament on the issue cut straight to the heart of what the public wants to know. His line of questioning was direct and unapologetic, demanding answers to uncomfortable but crucial topics like why aren't all guilty foreign nationals deported, along with family members who may have been complicit? Why is there no transparency on the number of victims and their perpetrators involved? Why has the government not acted on officials who knew about these crimes and failed to act? And how many perpetrators have reoffended after being released? And why are victims forced to encounter their abusers in public spaces? Let's have a listen now to his speech in full. Feel free to skip ahead if you've already heard it before.
The British people want answers, so I'm going to ask questions of the Labour Party and several of them. Will the government commit to urgently deporting all guilty foreign nationals involved, including family members who were aware of the crimes and therefore complicit? Wives, sisters, mothers, cousins, if they knew and said nothing, these individuals are just as guilty as the rapists themselves. Will the government commit to stripping citizenship from dual nationals implicated and deport them as well? Race or religion must protect nobody. Will the government commit to pausing all Pakistani visas and foreign aid into the country until the Pakistani government agrees to accept any of its deported citizens that have perpetrated these crimes on British soil, and also imprisons these rapists and their accomplices in Pakistan, however they see fit? Will the government undertake a full investigation into officials who had knowledge of these crimes yet failed to act? Establish a specified task force to root out this wicked evil. Don't just fire these vile individuals, prosecute them. How many girls are estimated to have been raped? Is there a tally for the overall number of rapes? Horrifyingly, it may well be in the millions. We just don't know. How many vulnerable young girls are estimated to still be involved in these gangs? If there is no estimate figure, why not? Will a regular update be published detailing ongoing prosecutions and sentencing? Will the government publish a full nationality breakdown of those convicted for such offences, along with the location of their crimes? How many known foreign rapists per town, per region? Will they publish a breakdown of the immigration status of those involved? On what grounds were they in the UK? Do they have previous convictions? How many foreign nationals found guilty have been released but not deported? And how many reoffences, I'm going to carry on if that's right, how many reoffences have occurred since release? How many of these monsters are walking on the same streets as the girls they raped and abused? One report suggested a victim had come face to face with her rapist in the supermarket. Is the government comfortable with that? How many of the foreign rapists were in receipt of any form of state benefit? Would the honourable member give I'm going to carry on if that's right. How many released currently receive any state benefit? How many children have been born following a rape from these men? How many have been given access to the child against the mother's wishes? And how many have used the child as a route to remain in the UK? Will the government commit to preventing this in future? How many deportations have been blocked due to the rapist's right to a family life or other ECHR influences? Will the government set up a dedicated, confidential and accessible official process for whistleblowers to safely raise their concerns regarding foreign rape gangs, ensuring it is safe, secure and easy to find? Will the government release all court transcripts relating to these cases so the British people can understand just part of the horror for themselves? How many of these documents have been hidden due to the cost of release? This should not be an obstacle to transparency on these trials. Will lifelong sentences now be considered for those British citizens involved in the crimes, but also those in positions of power who acted to cover up the scale of the abuse? Which politicians, local and national, had knowledge of these events but failed to act? Again, going as far as to actively conceal what was truly happening. These are the facts that the British people want to know and the British people deserve to know. All of these questions have also been submitted in written form, and I look forward to receiving open and transparent answers. The mass rape of young white working class girls by gangs of Pakistani rapists is a rotting stain on our nation. This is not about Elon Musk. This is not a bandwagon of the far right. This is about the victims and ensuring swift and brutal justice is delivered to those demons responsible. It is about distinguishing between right and wrong. I finished.
So these are not extreme or unreasonable questions that Lowe is asking here. They are the bare minimum in a country that supposedly prides itself on justice and accountability. Yet instead of engaging with these critical issues, members of the Labour Party just heckled Lowe during his speech. Such behaviour demonstrates a shocking disregard for the gravity of the subject and the victims who continue to suffer. Lowe's assertion that the mass abuse of young, predominantly white, working class girls by grooming gangs represents a rotten stain on Britain's conscience struck a nerve. His speech highlighted the government's reluctance to address the systemic failures that have allowed these atrocities to persist. Labour's dismissive response, including heckling Lowe in Parliament, was nothing short of shameful. Starmer's reaction to calls for an inquiry has been equally troubling. Branding those who demand answers as jumping on a far-right bandwagon is an insult to victims, their families, and all those seeking justice. This rhetoric is not only divisive, but is also disingenuous. It's an attempt to delegitimise valid concerns and deflect from Labour's inaction on one of the most significant scandals in modern British history. Starmer even accused Kemi Badenoch of jumping on the bandwagon.
Children's Minister. She was the Women's and Equalities Minister. I can't recall her once raising this issue in the House, once calling for a national inquiry. It's only in recent days she's jumped on the bandwagon. Now, Mr. Speaker, in fairness, if I'm wrong about that, and she has raised it, then I invite her to say that now, and I will happily withdraw the remark that she hasn't raised it in this House in the 8 years that she's been here until today.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is being very specific because I have raised this issue. I've raised it in speeches, I've raised it publicly. He knows that as a minister, I would not have been speaking on this specific issue. I was not a Home Office minister, but Mr. Speaker, I will remind him about other victims who came to me who I did help. The victims of the Tavistock scandal who came to me as a minister. I didn't send them away like his safeguarding minister. I made sure, as his Labour Party were calling me transphobic, that we launched the CAS review, which even his health secretary has accepted. So we do right by victims, Mr. Speaker.
Badenoch's response clearly rattled Jess Phillips, underscoring the fragility of Labour's position on the matter. The Prime Minister's comments come at a time when his party faces mounting pressure to address its role in enabling these crimes. Former Labour MP Anne Cryer has publicly stated that she was labelled a racist by raising concerns about grooming gangs. Similarly, MP Sarah Champion was vilified by her own party for speaking out, highlighting a disturbing trend of silencing voices that dare to confront the uncomfortable truths about these crimes. The decision to block a national inquiry raises serious questions about what Labour is trying to avoid. Is the refusal to investigate an attempt to shield the party from potential fallout? I wouldn't be surprised, given that many of the councils implicated in the past failures were Labour-run councils. The unwillingness to confront this issue head-on reeks of self-preservation at the expense of justice. Even Elon Musk has stepped up and criticised Starmer's government for its inaction, accusing Labour of enabling a R-word genocide by failing to address grooming gangs during Starmer's tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions. Musk's comments resonate with the frustration of a public that has seen decades of inaction and obfuscation, only to be swept under the carpet by a Labour government. Labour's defence against an inquiry has largely been that the independent inquiry into child abuse was sufficient. However, critics, including Rupert Lowe, argued that the IICSA's scope was too broad and failed to adequately address grooming gangs specifically. And yes, another inquiry could take another decade. But how can victims trust Labour is serious about justice if it refuses to confront these systemic failures? To make things worse, Labour government's recent TikTok campaign, released on the same day that debates over grooming gangs dominated headlines, further underscored its tone deafness. The video, featuring animated animals dressed as nurses and police officers, was bizarrely accompanied by a Portuguese song with lyrics referencing violence against young girls. Whether intentional or not, the timing and the content of this campaign were appallingly inappropriate. So, was this intentional? If it wasn't, it demonstrated Labour's complete incompetence. The British public deserve transparency on this issue, and victims of grooming gangs deserve justice. The Labour government's attempt to silence debate and smear those demanding answers only deepens suspicions that it has something to hide. What is Starmer hiding? Why is he so afraid? Starmer's tactic of labelling critics as far right is lazy and dangerous. How much longer is he going to keep labelling anyone that disagrees with him as far right? Most Labour MPs must be cringing every time he uses the phrase. Each time he does, he further alienates the voter base. It undermines genuine efforts to hold perpetrators and enablers accountable and deflects from the urgent need to protect vulnerable children. If Labour cannot confront these issues with the seriousness they demand, we need to ask, who is Starmer really protecting? The British people won't be silenced on this issue, and neither should Parliament. Labour's actions, or lack of, speak louder than any speech. It's time for government to stop running from the truth and start delivering justice. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.